Hi, this is Jim Gibson with CableSupply.com. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate it. And this is going to be video 5. Now, notice there's no wires hanging down or patch panels or things like that. And the reason why I decided to do this last video was because on video 4 there were so many questions from people. And a lot of the questions were duplicate questions, and probably a lot of the questions that viewers were watching concerning video number 4 were probably some really good questions that a lot of people would probably want answered. So I decided to print them out and to answer some of the questions on the video. Save me time. It would also provide those answers to other people that don't necessarily, read all the comments. So these are from the comments on YouTube, and so what I'm going to do is just read the questions and give you an answer. So the first question is, what Fluke tester was the technician using? And if you notice in the video, there was a technician there that was had the Fluke tester, and he had it a little bit to the left of the patch panels, and he had it hung up, which is pretty much what I do on my tester. I hang it right there, and then I have a cord that goes from the tester to the patch panel, and you want to test every single jack you put in. It only takes a second. You got to label it anyway, so you got to identify it. So what he's using is he's using the LEDs that I sell, or that the website sells, 24 to a pack, and he had the combo pack, which is the power supply and the LEDs. But he didn't use the power supply. What he used was the remote to his Fluke tester. Now, I haven't really investigated enough to know what voltage Fluke tester puts out, but LEDs have a limit to how much voltage they can take before they self-destruct. It is kind of interesting watching an LED self-destruct. One time I put excess voltage on just an LED that was being held out in space, and man, it really made some interesting sparks. But anyway, make a long story short, you shouldn't go past 3 volts on an LED. I don't know what his equipment were doing, but I do believe it was safe. It appeared to be safe. Now, you notice that if you looked at the patch panel, the lights were kind of going out and then coming in, going out and going in. And that's called switch blink. So what was happening was the Fluke tester has 2 parts. It has a part you saw that's in the data room, and the second part is out on the floor. So the other technician is plugging into each jack. And so he's just plugging in his remote, and we had all the patch panels populated with LEDs. So all the patch panels were populated. He was plugging in his Fluke remote, not the battery pack. So he was plugging in the Fluke remote, and that was causing a switch blink. And that's always good to have, because if you plug in and the switch is already attached to that port, that outlet on the floor, well, then if you look at the switch, the switch light will go like this, just like the LEDs did. And I do believe that's probably safe, that voltage, to work with the LEDs. It didn't seem to be a problem. He's been using the LEDs for a while, so he didn't have any issues with his LEDs. But it was really nice. So normally if you have the battery pack, it's going to be solid red. It's not going to blink. It's not going to go in and out. That's caused by the Fluke tester, the other end, the remote of the Fluke tester. And that saves time too, because all you had to do was pull the LEDs and stick in the tester, and you saw him do that. And so he's testing. He's looking at it on the left to make sure it passes. And then once it passes, the person out in the office area doing the testing is getting a little code telling him, a little sound telling him that it passed tests. So he's unplugging immediately. He's not even talking to the person in the data room. So that's a nice combination. Works really well, and it saves a lot of time. I estimate when you're doing a decent sized job, it's going to be about a 30% savings. So to tell you what model number he had, I don't know. I don't know the model number. I may have mentioned it in the video, but I don't know the model number of the Fluke tester that he had. Fluke is kind of, it's sort of like the Lexus of testers. It's the most expensive, has more features, things like that. There's a lot of other testers out there. that are a lot less expensive that do the basic test, and that's all you may need. But if you want the top of the line tester, it's going to be a Fluke. Let's see, the other thing. Liked your talk at the end about the trades. I believe this as well. Well, if you stuck to the very end, I made a comment about people who wear hard hats and people that actually wake up in the morning and they go out to work and they look at the plans and they install. They do the actual labor to put things in. And of course, you know, if you look around your neighborhood, or if you, especially, I always think this when I go downtown, a big downtown, you know, when I'm in San Diego or in Philadelphia or LA and all, and I see these big skyscrapers, you know, and you got to have the engineers to design these skyscrapers and all, but those guys are the ones out there building it. They're the hard hats. They're the trades. And I dislike it when I hear some people talk down to trade people because, you know, they're just trades, you know, anyone could do that. They don't have a PhD in engineering. Well, you know something, they do have talent and skill, and it takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of talent. There's some people just can't do it. I remember a programmer that worked for me, and I asked him to give me a Phillips screwdriver, and he went and he fooled with the screwdrivers for a while, and then he came back and he said, what's a Phillips screwdriver? And I kind of laughed at him. I said, well, that's the plus. The minus is the regular screwdriver. The Phillips is the plus. So it does take talent, and you have to have that type of talent. And maybe you don't have the talent to go through and get a PhD. That doesn't mean that you're not as valuable. You know, who's going to build these things? It's the builders out there that build the bridges and stuff like that. And I also mentioned the fact that I always had respect for my grandfather, who was a steel worker, who worked high up on the buildings with. And back then, you know, back in the 40s and 50s, you didn't have safety apparatuses. You just walked down that I-beam, and it took a lot of guts and a lot of skill to put those things together. And those guys work hard. So answered that. Let's see the next. Tell me, please, what LEDs you use and where can I buy them? Well, this is I invented the LED things one time because I had a big project in LA. I don't know how many. It was hundreds. And I wasn't going to sit there with a toner and the probe and find each one and things like that. Now, there's some tricks you can do. You know, you got south wing of a floor and you got a north wing of a floor, and so you'd separate those bundles of cables when they come in. So you know, you do the north wing so many patch panels, and then you know, then you start this, you know, the south wing on the other patch panels, and it gives you some sort of separation. But still, it does take a long time to tone, and sometimes you go all the way through with the probe into each outlet of the patch panel. And, you know, you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes you can go quicker, you know, but sometimes you get all the way to the end and you say, I can't find the darn things. You got to start all over again. So when you're talking about hundreds of cables now, and starting all over again is a real pain. So the thing I liked about my LEDs is that once that port was identified, you took the LED out, and then you had a visual indication that the LED, that port had been identified. Now, when I have multiple patch panels, I don't call them patch panel 1, patch panel 2, patch panel 3, because then the jack goes with the port on the patch panel. So I always name my patch panels A, B, C, D, E, F, G, things like that, going down the list. And then the port itself. So if I have patch panel B, and I have the 22nd port on patch panel B, then on the jack out in the warehouse or out in the office area is going to be, you know, B24 or whatever it was, 22. And so if you use all numbers rather than letter number combination, then it's hard to identify and makes it a little more confusing. So I always use letters and numbers, alpha and then numerics, to identify the jacks that are out there. And he says, you know, please tell me where to buy them. Well, you buy them on my website, on my e-commerce site, CableSupply.com. But in this case, I am sorry. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I know you're from Russia, and it was a very kind email you sent to me with compliments and all, but we do not sell them outside the United States. Will in the future. It just takes a lot of extra work. You got to have all the legal down and all the parameters, and it goes on and on. If you are outside the country and you want these things, and you have a relative that lives somewhere in the United States, I can send it to the relative, and then they can send it to you. But right now we don't ship outside the United States, and I do have patent pending on the products, which is great because the patent pending is, it's just the way to go. Patents are just very expensive. Let's see, next. He goes on and on, plans to be in IT, which is really a good field to be in. I always liked working in IT. The reason why was always kept me interested. Plus, you work inside most of the time when you do this type of cabling. So you're not out there in the snowstorms, the rainstorms, the hail, the nasty stuff. You're working in air-conditioned facilities. So if you're in Arizona, you're in a building that hopefully has air conditioning. Sometimes it's not always pleasant. I worked in buildings that didn't have electricity, and I had to work there at 2 in the morning to get the job done before I went to my day job back then, years ago. And flashlight, you hold a flashlight in your mouth as you holding the cable up and you're punching down. Yeah, that's what you do if you want to start a business. But he mentioned, you mentioned that learning how to program switches would be very helpful. That is, what is the best way to go about doing that? And if I can just go out and buy an expensive switch. No, I wouldn't buy an expensive switch to start with. I wouldn't buy anything, to tell you the truth, except a book. And so you want to go with CCENT first, which is Cisco, sometimes they call it Route Switch 1. And you can look it up on the Cisco website, Cisco.com, under certifications. And I would go for the certification because it gives you a goal. And when you're certified in Cisco, you're doing pretty good. Now, there's other people out there that Juniper, you got some other switches and everything else, but really at this point, Cisco is the standard when it comes to switches and routers and things like that. And you really have to learn networking first. Now, I'm going to do a video on this in the future, so I'll tell you exactly how to do it. But you don't want to buy a switch yet. You want to wait till you get in your second switch before you buy the switch, or a second book, ICND 2. So ICND 1 is for the certification of CCENT. Look it up on Cisco's website. You'll see it. But you want to hold off on buying a switch until you get into ICND 2. And at that rate, you just buy a switch off of eBay or something like that. You don't need a really fancy switch at that point, top of the line, most expensive stuff. It's just not worth it. So you buy an older switch, and you just practice on it. As long as it's Cisco and as long as it's managed. You do that, and again, we're going to have a class on this. And there is software, and man, that software is good, that you can put on your laptop or on your computer, and it has the different it has the switches and the routers, and you can connect them together, and you can see how they work. And if you send a packet from one to the other, you can watch how it's going and what route it's taken, and you can figure out why. So the software is actually better yet, and I don't know where to get that software at. Right off the top of my head, it's a Cisco software. But I think if you Google it, you could probably find it. And when I do that course, that's a massive course, so that's the problem. But when I do that course on route switch, then I'll have it and I'll show it to you, and I'll even show it to you online, and how it works and how to design a network online. It's really a lot of fun, and it's I found myself when I was studying this at first really getting caught up in it for hours and hours and hours, and realizing that hey, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I got to get up at 7, or something like that. Also, if you want to look at Network Plus, Network Plus is a great way to learn networks and things like that. And I've promised for a long time that I would do how to subnet the easy way, and the fast way, the accurate way, and we'll probably do that in the near future. But I noticed most people watching my video just kind of like, layer one stuff, the cabling. They like the techniques and how to cable and how it's done and all. And in the near future, I hope, I'm going to have a video on how to bid a job. A lot of people ask me those questions. And I can't really say it over this video because it takes a little bit longer than just simple answers and questions. And that was one of the questions. How do you bid a job? How do you design a job like the commercial cabling job that we just saw in video? So let's see, the next questions. Let's see. I kind of answered that. I'm looking to get into this and can't seem to find a good course. There doesn't seem to be courses in this layer one called, layer one technology, where, you learn cabling and construction and things like that. I am interested in teaching that course whenever I get around to it. The actual, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, things like that. And actually holding a course like that. And I bet you if you go into most colleges, junior colleges, as I've mentioned in other videos, are probably the best when it comes to teaching certifications and things like that. That's really the best thing, is if you're going to go to college and you're going to learn route switch and you're going to learn these different network stuff and computer stuff, make sure you also get the certification that they're talking about. And of course, I always say, stay away from the subject matters that ends with studies. There's just a waste of money, in my opinion. But if you want me to teach a course, then hey, call Palomar College computer section and tell them, because I get a lot of people that ask me to teach courses, and maybe I can videotape it and I can show you as I teach the actual course. There's a plug. Palomar College in California. I think it's in Vista, California. Computer science department, and talk to the dean. It's one of the best out there, in my opinion, as far as training. A lot of the people that worked with me for many, many years would be interns that would come to me, and so they'd be going to school at the same time they're learning route switch and things like that, and then they would come and work for me and get the nuts and bolts and how it's done in a real world. But at the same time, they still needed to know how to program a router and a switch and a firewall and things like that. It's really interesting, by the way. I love it. I could be lost in that programming for hours. I haven't done it in a while, but no one's asked me to do it. Let's see. Next question. The tech we didn't see was plugging his Fluke near the tables to light up the patch cord. Correct? Is that correct? Yes. I already answered that question. Someone else asked that question. He was out in the office area, and he was plugging in. You didn't see him, except at the very end when they had a jack that wasn't punched down right, and he was fixing it. And that's why you test, by the way. So let's see was plugging in his Fluke at the table. Yes, I already answered that. And why was the tech plugging in the black cord after the ports were lighting up? Well, that black cord was the other end of the Fluke tester. So, as I already mentioned in another question, answered another question, that black cable he was plugging in. So as soon as he pulled the LEDs, he was pushing, as we would say. I always use the term, my company has always used that term, we called it pull and push. So he'd pull the LEDs and it'd push the tester. So at the other end, they just had the remote already plugged in, and he didn't even know probably the LEDs were lit. So as soon as he saw the LEDs flashing slowly, that's blink test or switch blink, he was unplugging the LEDs, plugging in his tester. I already covered this earlier, so let's see. Was this process identifying and certifying the cables? Yes, it was. It was identifying the cables and certifying. So as soon as he plugged in that remote, it lit up that LED. They knew exactly what cable it was at what port, and so they had all the details. And he was out in the the office area, and he was labeling the thing. Now, I didn't catch him labeling it, to tell you the truth, looking at the video. So maybe they're going to go back and identify it later. It seems like an extra step to me. At that point, you can identify that that jack on that wall or underneath that desk is, switch A, port 3. That's all you need, and then you write that down. And then you label the jack. And then what you do is, the best thing to do is in the floor plan, you actually write on the floor plan, right where that jack is, nice and neat. You write in there, A-5 or whatever port that was. And then that goes up on the wall. If the IT people are sharp, they'll put that up on the wall and maybe put a piece of glass over or put it in a frame. And then anytime they want to, they can look at it. But the easiest part is just going out into the office space and talking to the employee and saying, oh, you need that computer hooked up over there? No problem. When we look at the jack, oh, it's A3. No problem. Go back and you plug in A3. So you just don't want to plug in every outlet into a switch. It's just not wise to do that, because then people can go out and plug in whatever they want into those open outlets, and there's a cybersecurity reason why you don't want to do that. Plus, all those ports need to be programmed specifically for the equipment that's going to be plugged into it. So, yes, it was identifying and certifying the cables, or at least it was certifying the cables. I don't know why I didn't catch exactly what he was writing down or how he was communicating. But you can watch the video. That's video 4. Did you ever run into young folks that think they know better and faster ways of doing things? I've ran into people that insist they know better and then waste more time doing the task, again, the correct way after they screw up. Well, people are people. I know you mentioned here about millennials. I don't know. They're just the same as any other generation from what I can see. Every generation has its quirks, especially mine. 60 protests and all were ridiculous. But anyway, to make a long story short, there's always people that have that attitude. And I just remember one time a student from one of the colleges was working for me as an intern. And I'd say, okay, let's do it this way. And he would turn around and say, oh, no, I was told to do it this way. And I listened a little bit, and I said, no, this is the way it's done now. So maybe that was done the way it was done 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But this is the way it's done now, okay? And then he started arguing with me, and I said, okay, who signs your check? And he said, well, you do. And I said, okay, then do it my way. So that settled the argument. And so that was his argument with me on that. Let's see, he's done doing tasks again. It's just life, man. People are just like that. Just try to get along with everybody and respect everybody. Nice job showing the work is done. After the install is complete, this type of job is forgotten about. Well, I don't know if it's, I guess it is forgotten about. People forget who did the cabling that looks so nice and things like that. But I take pride in my cabling, so I want it done right. And I don't think so much about, well, am I making a ton of profit on this or things like that. Now, you got to do it fast, but you got to do it right, and you have to show your skill. So this demonstrates who you are. And I get satisfaction after I'm done a cabling job and I look at that cable and how neat it is. I like the fact that I don't get callbacks, because I tested every single jack. So that I do like. And we're getting close to the end. And there's the last question. Okay, did I create that? And I think we're talking about the LEDs. I already answered that. Wish I had that system on my last job, which was 1,000 cubicles. Toning each one out was a headache. I do like to keep all the cables in order, though. Okay, well, there's times you keep all the cables in orders, okay? So if you have, I don't know, if you have a small job, 10 cables or something like that, it's no big deal. Keep them in order, okay? I don't know why you wouldn't, why it's a big deal, but there's a lot of IT guys that don't do cabling, and they feel like everything should be in order. And I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on that comment, because I always do. And that's fine if you want to put them in order, but just think that for every additional cable that's brought into the system, as your cable. And so if you're doing 1,000, not 1,000 cables, let's say 200 cables, and you got to keep them all in order, you're talking about a tremendous amount of labor. Going through that pile of cables and looking for that number you wrote down with the Sharpie. And then when you're all done, the customer turns around and says, "Oh, I want to add another cable between those two cubes." And there's the end of your system. It's all over. So I have found out as an experienced cabler, and I've done this for many, many years, that you just pull the darn cable, you dress it really nice, you don't worry about, if it's going to be start here and work circular around the room. You just put the darn cables in, and then you identify them and you label them. Because the person that comes after you to plug into those cables and plug into that wall outlet, all they're going to do is look at that jack and say, "Oh, that's patch panel B, port number 10. That's it. That's going to be simple. If you do it in order, as soon as you do adds to that system you put in, someone is going to, it's going to be all messed up. So no one's going to sit there and look at a floor plan, let's say, and say, "Oh, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it must be number 5. No, you should be going out to the floor. You should be looking at the jack, seeing what it is, and then labeling it. Patching it in. That's all. That's as simple as that. So it adds a lot of extra labor. And so, this is getting a little bit into bidding. So let's say you're competing with another company and you're doing a bid in there, and the other company is just going to put the cables in and label them, patch them, test them, everything. Everything's going to look beautiful, everything else, and it's going to look professional. And then you decide you have to put another 40% of time, labor into it to do it in order. Who do you think is going to get that job? And are both jobs done according to standards, Ethernet standards, and are both jobs going to work perfectly fine? Yeah, if you put the skill into each one, it's not going to work any better because they're in order, And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail on this. I hope not. It's just my opinion. If you want to put them in order, go ahead, put them in order. I do not put them in order. The customer asks, and it's a really small job, 5, 10 things, no big deal. But the customer doesn't ask. They go in, they get their labels on there, and it's taken care of that way. So I hope I've answered all your questions. Probably not. But this is the fastest way I can do it because there's a lot of people who had a lot of questions. And I'm going to tell each person that they just need to go to video number 5. In the future, I'm going to be doing the how to bid a job. And of course, I got to start working on some other series. We have another series coming up, which is a doctor's suite. And that's going to be a little different. Everyone cables a little differently, by the way. As long as it's right, as long as it works, and as long as it's neat. That's the point I look at. We're going to do these other videos coming in the future. Now, if you watch this video and you have comments, yeah, go ahead, comment. If you do it in order, fine. Tell me the reason why. I'm open. I'll be happy to listen to your reasoning and things like that. But also, if you want me to do videos on other subjects, or if you like the bidding video that I'm working on, then let me know. And also, if you like some courses, on routers, switches, cybersecurity, how to manage a job, how to design a job, how to work with other trades, things like that. More than happy to do any of those videos. I've done this my whole adult life. Not cabling, but IT. I've done my whole adult life, so I know all this. I'm still learning. Every day I learn something new. And I'm glad I do, because it's an interesting field to be in. And I do thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.